A year and a half ago, I started to set up an AV system in our vacation home. Okay, as we become snowbirds, it's actually our winter home. Encountered many problems with it. Some of them my fault, some of them the installer's, some of them was just the design of the room. My intent here is to go through all of these, and maybe you can learn from some of the mistakes I made. The system has been corrected. It's functioning very nicely now. Very happy with it. It's not the way I envisioned it in the beginning, but it's a lot nicer sounding than it is now. Now, in the process, I had to take into consideration a number of factors, and given there's no dedicated AV room in this house, I also had to take into consideration the opinions of she who must be obeyed, and they also added to some of the issues I encountered. All has been resolved. My wife has been very understanding through the whole thing. The system now sounds nice, and again, as I said, this video will probably be longer than I usually go, but I'm hoping not to break it up into more than one video, as I think it will be easier to follow the process of what I went through. My intent is to back up and go through each error we found along the way, what we did to correct it, where that next led us to the next piece of or next issue that we wanted to correct, until we finally got to where we are today. Now, first, we're going to take a walk around the room, show you some of the problems I had to deal with. One is the wife's decorating. She has to have a chair in front of the stereo. She has to have a chair in front of one of the speakers. Now, the problems these encountered, one might interfere with the speaker. The other is a pain in the butt when using the remote control. But hey, I gotta live with the wife, so gotta make adjustments. Next, the room is huge. Okay, we have 18-foot ceilings. Okay, they come away. We have a wall with glass windows over here, and then we come back, we have an open back area. Now, this is not going to lend well to rear speakers, and I sort of gave up the idea of trying to put rear speakers into place. We come around here, we have an open side. So, I'm concerned when we're starting this whole venture that I'm going to have issues with power, with sound, and getting everything just right. And although most of you will not have issues with a room like this, if you're lucky enough to have a dedicated room, you're going to have a lower ceiling, and that will make things better as far as the reflections go. The high ceiling here gave me problems with the original speaker selection I made. I will go into that in the next clip. So there you have the room, high ceilings, open side, no way to get rear speakers in the back, because with that high ceiling, there's no real way to drop wires, at least not cheaply, and I didn't want to go wireless. And we have the left-hand wall that is all glass, and it looked like an interesting project. So let's get started. First, we'll go through the system as I hoped it would be, and then it proved inadequate. The nature of the room was part of the issue, as I said. I had auditioned the speakers. Unfortunately, in the showroom, it was a more conventional type room, which I neglected to take into account the issues I might encounter in my living room. So that was part of what we had here. So we'll go through the equipment first that we started with, and then get into the speakers, and finally what we ended with. So in the center we have a Vizio 70-inch 4K UHD TV. This has been a lovely TV, reasonably priced. Others may prefer other TVs, whatever. That's why I'm not giving a model number, but it really was a good value for the money. We've been very happy with it, and it even has built-in Chromecast. For the heart of the system, we have a Yamaha RX-A 860 receiver. I went up to the 860. I was tempted to go higher, but thought this would suit my needs, and so far it has, because I needed a phono input, and I believe the phono input started at the 760, and I wanted at least 100 watts of power, which brought me to the 860. So I've used Yamaha before. I've been using it for 20 years. Using Yamahas for 20 years. I found them to be dependable, hard-working amps, and their customer service department's been fantastic over the years. So I've enjoyed it. It, as I'm also discovering, has a very good menu system for touching up your system as you go along, which will be the heart of this video. For playing LPs or music, which is my basic sound source for music, I don't use the radio a lot, we have a Fisher Studio Standard MT273 turntable. This goes back to the mid-80s. It's direct drive, still works fine, although I recently had a new Ortofon M10 cartridge professionally installed with it and had the machine checked out before we put it back into use, since it had been sitting around for a while. So that's our major sound source. Now there's also a Blu-ray player cable box. Obviously I'm not going to bother showing you those. And now we'll move on to the speakers where the issues tended to develop. Now here we have what I thought was going to be my main left and right speaker, the MartinLogan Edge. These are in-the-wall speakers. As I said at the beginning, I was trying to keep my wife's decorating into account. I was trying to avoid putting in tower speakers, and these sounded really awesome in the store. And I was looking forward to them. Frankly, they still sound good with just music, but they get lost in this room in audio video. So I had to figure out what to do with them. There were some other issues with them that we will get into as we go along. But this was, although they're a great speaker, they were a big disappointment. And we'll get into why. Now for a center channel, I had gone for a surface mount. This also is a MartinLogan SLM. And we encountered issues with this as well. Again, a good speaker, sounded good in the listening tests, but in the room itself we had problems with it. It was getting overpowered by the left and right. We ended up having to play things too loud. We couldn't hear each other talk if we wanted to talk to each other, and it just didn't seem to get the sound out. I finally figured that the problem was I needed something a little bigger that had a box around it that could get the sound into the room, and this just wasn't doing it. It's still in place, partially because I don't want to patch the wall right now. I'm also trying to figure out another way of using this, so before I take it down, I'm looking at options as to can I repurpose this and figure another way of using it. For a subwoofer, I'm using a Parts Express number 300 Titanic. This is a 10-inch front-fired subwoofer, and it does have its own amplification. Been very happy with it. It's worked fine, and it is in the updated system. So that's what we started with. Now we'll go to what we have now and the changes we've made, and then show how I basically troubleshooted this thing step by step. You know, your problems may not be the same as mine, but some of this may prove helpful. Now we have the system that I'm currently using. Okay, the hardware is still the same TV, same receiver, same turntable. However, you can see it behind the Klipsch. The SLM has been disconnected. I'm trying to figure out another use for it, so I haven't taken it down from the wall yet, but it's still there. The Klipsch RP450C has been fantastic. I had a minor issue with it that at the end of the video you'll see how I took care of that, but it has made all the difference. It gets the sound out, it fills the room, and it's been perfect for this situation. The MartinLogan Edges, which are on either side of the TV, are now front effect speakers, and you know, I hate to see them relegated to that use, but they just weren't working the other way. However, when put into 7-channel or multi-channel stereo, they just sound exquisite as part of the combination. And to round out the system, my main right and lefts are now these Klipsch heresies. And these were completely rebuilt last year. I picked up cabinets, all new innards in them, and they're about on par with the stuff Klipsch is putting out today. They're phenomenal sounding speaker, very happy with them, and you know, I would, although I might prefer a bigger speaker there, they filled the bill, and my wife didn't scream too much when I put the 4 standing speakers in. So that's the system, that's what we're working with, and now we'll go through the issues as we encountered them, or as I encountered them, and what I did to correct them. Now, there are no rear channels in use at this time. I am still trying to figure out the best way to get rear surrounds in. I do not want to go wireless, and I am concerned that running a wire would create a trip hazard if I go across the floor, and trying to run them up and over the room is virtually impossible. Surface wiring, I don't think would look very good going up the wall. So for the moment, I'm living without it. Frankly, there are enough room reflections, and the Yamaha does offer a sort of phantom rear that I'm using. The sound's not bad. We're happy with it, and for the moment, we're staying that way. Now we'll go through the issues and how I attack them point by point. Again, you may not have all of these issues, but you may encounter some of them, and it may help you deal with them as we go along. The MartinLogan Edges, great speakers. Turned out the room wasn't great for the speakers, or vice versa. They were professionally installed by a local part of a national brand. I won't mention names, but just based on that description, you can probably figure out who they were. They've done work for me before. They did nice work. Here they let me down, although they did do a neat job in doing the wall install and mounting the TV. Now, when they were putting the speakers in, I asked them if there should be insulation behind them. They said it's not needed, and went ahead and mounted them. Well, after they left, I was getting buzzing on the walls in the room behind it, which happens to be a bedroom, which didn't seem proper. And I did what we're always told to do, but very few of us actually do. I checked the manuals. The MartinLogan manual specifically says put insulation behind the speakers. So at 11 o'clock at night, being the obsessive compulsive I can be at times, I'm ripping insulation batting out of the attic walls to put behind the speakers. Okay, while I was in there, at least I discovered at that time, the receiver's telling me the left-hand speaker, the one you're looking at, was out of phase. Now, whether you're a pro or just a hobbyist or an audiophile or whatever you want to call yourself, always double check your wiring before you seal things up. This shouldn't have happened. I could have flipped it over with the receiver, but I preferred to have it done at the speaker end, and that's exactly what I did. I corrected the wiring, put the insulation behind the speakers, put them back on, and that took care of the buzzing of the wall in the other room. Now we have the system up and running, and I'm discovering the Martin-Logans, all three of them sound terrible. The bass is distorted out of the edges and the center, and it appeared, because they're narrow drivers, I was getting speaker crash from the cone crash from the speakers, so that they were not either handling the volume or the level of bass being sent to them. So here the system had been set up with the automatic setup, Yamaha's YPAO. You know, you use the mic and it sets everything up, sets the distances, sets everything. And apparently it does not take into account the bass response of the speakers. So I had to go in to the setup, and if you weren't aware these existed, I am now a big fan of manual setup after this experience. Go to manual, and you can now find your speakers. You got your configuration, you got your front center, they're all listed there. And let's go to the front presence, since they are now the Martin-Logans. They were the right and lefts, so we'll go there. And I did this for all speakers. I set them to small. And once they were set to small, if I clicked on that, I could now change the crossover point in the Yamaha so that it would cut out ultra low bass from them. I had the subwoofer anyway. So now I was able to set this, and we can step back, and my edges now stopped the speaker crash. Okay, so that problem was taken care of. So we've eliminated the wall vibration, the speaker crash, and we got our wires corrected. So you would think that would be it. Not quite. Now as we're watching, we realize we're watching with a it's like a bad Japanese movie from the 60s. We got a lip sync problem. And apparently, I just found out about this in the last year, you now have lip sync options with these receivers. And I guess it makes sense so that if you, depending where you put your speakers, whether in front, behind, above, the TV, it could have an effect on your sound. Or if you're using a projection TV, I guess. At any rate, going to sound instead of the speaker configuration, the first item there is lip sync. I click on that. Now in this case, all I had to do was change it to manual, and whatever delay had been put up in there from the automatic setup was now taken out, and my lip sync was fine. Another receiver, another location, discovered a similar problem. There I actually had to change the adjustment to 2 millisecond delay. Your system may be different, but if you discover that, you probably have that in your system, because frankly, I think all of these receivers are in similar situations today, and they have to offer similar menus for correcting these problems. So whether it's Denon, Yamaha, Sony, whatever the receiver, you're gonna find a menu system in there, and don't be afraid of it. If you have questions, call the company. I did that. I have called Martin-Logan, I called Yamaha. They were very helpful on the phone with taking care of these things. Now we're back to setup. So we've gone through that. I've corrected the lip sync. I corrected the crossover for the speakers. By the way, I've done this for all the speakers in the system now. I checked their specs and entered the bottom crossover point for them so they won't be overdriven. That seems to have worked. The lip sync's now fixed, and now, since I've gone this far and everything's in manual, I wanted to check the other options. So we're in setup again, and now we're going to go back to our speakers, back to manual. And remember, I set them all to small. Now we're going to go in and check the distances. These can all be changed, whether feet or meters. You can move them around however you like. I had off-the-wall numbers from the automatic setup. Maybe it's because of the open wall on the right and the windows on the left and the high ceiling. I don't know. But I actually got out a tape measure, checked my distances, and then entered them. That seemed to balance the sound from the system quite nicely. So you can do that. Let's go back. Now we got the configuration, and now I was mentioning balancing the system. We can then set the levels on the speakers. To do that, you're going to have to come down to the test tone. Whoops. Come down to the test tone. You can now generate the test tone from each speaker, and using a VU meter at your listening position. Now, I don't have a VU meter, so I downloaded an app to my phone. It was a free app. Use that in my listening position to balance out the test tone, and check the test tone, found the weak speakers, and then I could go back, and now I can go in and change the levels on every speaker as I go along. I could raise them, lower them, test them, listen to a source, then go back and modify it if necessary. So that was the next step here. And that was now bringing the system into a very nice listening environment, making major changes by doing this stuff. Next, and thankfully the final issue. This past December, we're now just over a year into working on this and living with it. Of course, we're not here full time. I took the center channel, the MartinLogan SLM, off the system, although it's still mounted there, and replaced it with the Klipsch RP450C. This was a very sweet speaker, and been very happy with it, and was encouraged that everything was finally sounding good. And then I noticed certain low male voices had issues. I was getting a sort of a rumble from them, some distortion, not sure what was going on, and wasn't sure what to do about it. And then I guess sort of attacked it logically. I went online, got a PDF of different frequencies that voice and instruments show represent on the frequency scale, and here's the PDF so that you can peruse it at your leisure if you like. And I went into my settings again, and went into setup, and I went down again to manual. We're on the speakers, went to manual, but this time I decided to try altering the bass response in certain particular ranges of the center channel. So we went to the parametric equalizer. It had been, I think, originally set to the YPAO natural. I changed it to manual. And now again, you can do each speaker individually. I went to the center and altered the curve a bit. Okay, you can see there's a little dip now at 62.5 hertz. You know, I'm not convinced the voice was at that range, but it may have been a resonance of the actual frequency. I cut that. I made a couple other minor changes, and it corrected. Everything was fine. So since we made that change, everything's balanced out, everything is smooth, and the system is a joy to listen to. The AV use is now working very nicely, and when I put it into multi-channel stereo, it's just heaven to listen to. I mean, the music is just fantastic. So, that is how I step through everything. So that's basically my odyssey for the last year and a half of tuning and fine-tuning. It was doing something, sitting back, listening, deciding where the problem was, trying to figure out where the problem was, then attacking how to correct it. Now, I had made calls to Yamaha during this. I've spoken to Martin-Logan during this, which, by the way, don't hesitate to go and Google their phone numbers and call them. These people are great. They appreciate the input. They're great with advice, and they're good, solid people. So don't hesitate to call, to have them help you. They'll tell you where the menus are if you can't find them. Whatever receiver you use, I'm sure you will find the same customer care that I encountered with Yamaha. I've been using Yamaha for 20 years. I've been using Klipsch for over 20 years. I happen to like Klipsch. You can like other speakers. Martin-Logan makes a great speaker. In this application, they were a problem for me. One of their cabinets probably would have worked better. I was trying to avoid using a tower to fit into my wife's decorating needs. Frankly, if I knew I was going to have to go with a tower first, I might have gone with a bigger tower. But these Klipsch heresies sound fine. They're fantastic. They were a fun project to do, and they sound great. I know there are some guys out on YouTube that don't like Klipsch, and they actually down-talk them. I mean, it's what you like and what it comes down to. These are all respectable brands, whether it's Klipsch, Cerwin-Vega, Browns & Wilkins, Martin-Logan. You're talking quality products, and the only regret I had was I thought the Edge was going to work, and they were not cheap speakers. I could have bought a lovely pair of floor standing speakers for what those in-walls cost, and instead I ended up with those as well as the floor standing speakers, and that hurt a bit. But again, the way it turned out, the sound is great. I mean, the extra two speakers for multi-channel stereo truly sound fantastic. So thanks for listening. Any questions, any suggestions, any ideas, be happy to hear them. It's always a learning experience. I've been playing with stereos for, since the 60s. And some things change, some things don't. In some respects, it was easier back then because, you just put it in. If you needed to, you adjusted the volume levels and the tone controls. And you were good to go with just 2 channels. And now, every 2 years, your receiver's out of date. It's like computers used to be because they changed the HDMI, they put in new menus, and it's gotten tougher to keep up with what's going on. So, these videos have helped me. Hopefully, my video helps you, and I wish you luck in whatever system you're trying to put together and get the answers to. And just one last point I'll make. Whatever the system, if you hit a problem, just sit back and if you need to, even put out a flow sheet as to where the issue is and then try and walk your way through it. Most of these issues are fairly simple to backtrack to. And, it's in many respects not rocket science, although it's getting closer as the hardware and software gets more and more complicated. So have a great day and enjoy your systems.